it does not matter. The fact that the organizing body is a Muslim body does not make this exclusively for Muslims. So it's inclusive, tolerance, and balanced perspective. So when we're giving ideas or we're giving communicate, we're not giving it based on sentiment, we're giving it based on facts, based on experience, and based on what is standard in the recent world. Also to advocate for transformative change. It is obvious that at this point in time in Nigeria, we need change. And one of it is what we'll be discussing today. And one of the biggest problems in Nigeria right now is corruption. So we hope our speakers with their expertise will help us delve into it and we come up with a communique. Then also to build strategic partnership with government agencies, enough of the individualistic perspective. Okay, my opinion is superior, your opinion is superior. Rather, we come together. So we build that partnership with the government, with the individuals, with organizations, and so on. And finally, to mobilize public support and foster community engagement. Nigeria has done a lot and experienced a lot in the past years. So I think the greatest benefit will be for us to really, really be united by making sure that whatever we do to promote public support and foster community engagement. So basically, these are the terms of reference. And as introduced earlier by Professor Raimi Lukman is the chairman, myself, a member, Dr. Abubakar Mukhtar, another member, Dr. Nordin Bamiru, a member from LASU. Thank you so much. I hope your inclusiveness in this program and subsequent program will foster that big change we expect from Nigeria. Somebody prompt about that too.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lasba, for that beautiful brief. Now we are going to the business of the day. Permit me to introduce our panelists. I'll first read out a short introduction of the panelists. We actually have 4 seasoned scholars from different fields to add spices to the issue that we want to discuss. The first person to be introduced is Professor Hakeem Yusuf. Professor Hakeem Yusuf is a professor of global law from University of Derby, United Kingdom. Prof, you are welcome into our midst.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here and to see you after a long time.
Thank you very much, Prof, for that beautiful introduction. Also, I would like to introduce our esteemed Professor Tunde Akoni, Professor of Journalism and Development Communication from the esteemed Lagos State University. Prof, say hello to the participants. Professor Tunde Akoni.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning to the house. And let me say happy June 12th anniversary. It's my pleasure to be here. And I want to welcome welcome colleagues joining us on this session. Thank you very much, Dr. Raimi.
Yeah, thank you, Prof, for that particular short greeting. For those who know Professor Tunde Akoni, when it comes to journalism, civil society, development, is a force to be reckoned with. The third person to be introduced, very busy, very versatile, and also contributing to social impact in Nigeria, both in the academia and also in the Muslim ecosystem. And that is Professor Tajuddin Yusuf, Professor, Department of Actuarial Science, University of Lagos. Prof, say hello to the participants.
For this occasion, I say good morning, salam alaikum, wherever, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you might be watching us. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. And
thank you, Prof, for that greeting. Yeah. Finally, I would like to also welcome Dr. Ganiya Tijani Adenle. She is a lecturer and her field of specialization is media, gender, and communication. She's from Lagos State University. You are welcome, Doctor. You are muted. You are muted.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Walaikum
I
salam.
wish you good day to everybody. Happy Democracy Day, and I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, beautiful. I love the way our panelists introduce themselves and they all wish us happy Democracy Day. Now we are going to the business of the day, which is to discuss corruption. We are all corrupt. Let me take a lead by giving you a short definition by one of the foremost development economists in the world, in the person of Amartya Sen. For those who have read a lot about him, he defined corruption as a phenomenon that constitutes a form of violence against the poor. It deprives them of opportunities, silences their voice in governance, and robs them of dignity and resources that are already scarce. The institutionalization of corruption deepens social exclusion. This is a definition by a development economist. And if you look at this particular definition critically, it fits into all nooks and crannies of the world where poverty is visible, where marginalization is visible, where politics and capitalism, are being used as a weapon to pauperize the masses. So the way we are going to go about this particular discourse is to ask each panelist a question, and they are going to provide succinct response. So I will start with Professor Hakeem Yusuf, who is a professor of global law. When you are talking about intellectualism in the world, of course, you can't push United Kingdom aside. And the definition of corruption from the global perspective is very, very clear. So, Prof, how should corruption be defined to expose its systemic roots and move beyond dominant narratives that limit it to economic or financial misconduct? People have limited it to financial misconduct. So as a professor of global law, how should corruption be defined to expose its systemic roots and move beyond dominant narrative? Thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much. Again, I want to wish all of us on the platform a happy Democracy Day. I think mine was not clear enough like my colleagues. And to also thank MLA and CNIDA of MLA for inviting me to this auspicious occasion. I also want to, before going to the question, affirm MLA's approach as mentioned by Dr. Lasba, that it's an inclusive one, because I see on the forum from names only that it is not only members or sympathizers of MLA that are here, but colleagues across the board in the country. And this is a very healthy way for us to move forward. If we move forward as one, then we would get there. So thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of this. It's a privilege. Now, let's take it from what you said and the definition that Amartya Sen gave. That definition, in my view, is one, yes, about development. It's one that is focusing again on the economic, social, economic at best, okay? And when you look at, rightly as you said, this economic dimension has dominated, at least in Nigeria. It has dominated, it's not Nigeria alone, actually. It's the same here in the UK. It's dominated the approach to looking at corruption. Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC. Independent Corrupt Practices Commission. The EFCC's one is very clear. The ICPC one, unfortunately, is just doing exactly in a different form what EFCC is doing, focusing more ostensibly on government officials. Of course, EFCC leads in that. But my view of corruption, especially in our context in Nigeria and in Africa today, is one that needs, as you rightly said, to look at the corruption as something that signifies a breakdown of social, political, ethical, cultural systems in our society. So for me, corruption should involve looking at the breakdown of the social, of the political, of the ethical, of the value system of our society. Did that break down for personal gain or group gain, in my view, is what we should consider corruption to be. So for instance, when we talk about corruption, if you are employed to get to work, to start work at 8, and you begin you get to work at 10, you are denying the system of your services for 2 hours. If you are supposed to leave at 4 and you leave typically at 2, not without a plan to actually compensate for the 2 hours, it's a form of corruption, because you are earning for what you are not delivering. Okay? And that small act has multiple effects. It's not just about embezzlement. It's not just about misuse of public funds, but you doing something that breaches either political, ethical, social, economic, or cultural values. That, for me, is what corruption should be. And in Nigeria, that goes way back to sometimes some of our cultural attitudes, sometimes things that were instituted during the colonial period. But I suppose that colleagues will talk more about that later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof, for that succinct response. It resonates beautifully well with everyone. Today, we all read newspapers, we watch TVs, we surf the internet, and we have seen the way people have actually defined, corruption and the way they portray corruption. So we want to request a professor of journalism and development communication in the person of Professor Tunde Akoni to respond to this question. What everyday expressions and jokes subtly normalize corruption in Nigeria, especially among youth, and how do they affect intergenerational values? Again, what everyday expressions and jokes subtly normalize corruption, especially among youth, and how do they affect intergenerational value?
Yeah, thank you very much once again. It's my pleasure to be here. When you talk about the concept of corruption in the public space, it is such that the rate at which different segments of the society are infecting one another has been alarming. I have just published an article today to complement this effort, which I titled "Salute to Scholars from Street, June 12." And I did mention in that article a modest effort that I mustered just a few years back, called Kakoka, Campaign Against Corruption on the Campuses. The idea of that initiative was to look at how we could purge our young ones on the campuses of corrupt practices, of being initiated into corruption, of sustaining corruption, of sustaining culture of corruption. Because the society has been so much polluted by the folks in politics who don't seem to see anything wrong with corrupt conduct any longer. So today, you discover that even when public officers and largely, I mean, politicians in various public positions, when they come up to make pronouncements in relation to public policies, in relation to projects, and so on and so forth, they are no longer conscious of the need to uphold ethical uprightness. What you discover is that they are now, they have surrendered to anyhowness of whichever way anything goes in the society. Resources are no longer judiciously managed in the public space, and the folks in positions of responsibility are so resistant to questions. You try to raise issues on why things are being done wrongly, and then what they tell you is that you wait for your turn. So wait for your turn. What are you implying? Are you saying that, so when it is my turn, I should also continue the plundering that you guys have initiated? And you then discover that this has been stepped down so massively and extensively to the extent that you find this manifesting as graffiti and, all manner of expressions in different forms, on different platforms everywhere, especially on the ubiquitous social media platforms. Not again are people ashamed of obviously corrupt conduct and expressions. Magbimimara in Yoruba, for instance, don't deceive me, because now it's like we are used to being deceived. So
Don't cajole me.
So don't cajole me. So what otherwise should have been an expression of subtle affection is now underlined, now has undertone of corruption. So from the top to the lowest rung of the society, it's rather unfortunate that almost everyone, either directly or indirectly, now subscribes or endorses corruption. Indeed, few people who choose to be upright are the ones that are now labeled as extremists. Don't be surprised that if you choose to do things the right way at all times in this our society today, you stand to be labeled as an extremist. That, unfortunately, is the extent of the degeneracy of morality, especially in relation to corruption, to corrupt practices in our society. And you find out that except you are strong-minded, you are likely to also want to surrender to these constantly expanding frontiers of corruption. I made mention of a project that I initiated some time ago, supported by MacArthur Foundation. In the course of undertaking the preliminary research for that project, I organized focus group discussion for the different segments of the campus. The undergraduate students, the postgraduate students, teaching staff, non-teaching staff, and so forth. And, pitiably, you then discover that all of us, everyone across all of those segments agreed that we are now at the mercy of corruption and corrupt people. So what is the way out? That is what we need to keep working towards. And that is a duty, that's a task for all of us that must be done. Let me hold on.
Wow. That's a very beautiful submission from Professor Tunde Akoni. Apart from, talking from theoretical perspective or experiential perspective, there was a survey that validates the fact that we are all corrupt in one way or the other. And the slogan, in the public space is, wait for your turn. If you get here as a VC, do your own. If you're appointed as chairman, do your own. This is the message, being, strategically communicated to the leaders of tomorrow. So we thank Prof for that. So let's move to Professor Tajuddin Yusuf, who is actually a dynamic scholar of management and Islamic finance. I want to ask you, is it accurate to claim that we are all corrupt, or does this phrase conceal deeper issues of complicity, selective morality, and normalized defiance? Again, is it accurate to claim that we are all corrupt, or does this phrase conceal deeper issues of complicity, selective morality, and normalized defiance? Over to you, Prof.
Thank you. Thank you very much for initiating this discussion. The phrase "we are all corrupt" is often presented as a sweeping moral critique, but its accuracy and implications are deeply problematic, I must say. While it might resonate emotionally or rhetorically, it tends to oversimplify complex reality and can obscure more than it reveals. Okay, let's try to unpack this claim. Now, overgeneralization and moral equivalence, claiming that we are all corrupt implies a false equivalence between minor ethical lapses and systemic or institutional corruption. Let's take, for example, a citizen jaywalking or giving a small tip to expedite a service is not morally equivalent to embezzling public funds or engaging in state capture, which is very, very, very common here in Nigeria. It's not the same. So this flattening of moral gradation discourages critical scrutiny of power and accountability, making it easier to excuse or rationalize severe misconduct. It's not the same thing. But we all know that if we all see corruption, because it's a thing of the mind, it's a thing of the mind. People can decide to do, because every individual has that willpower to do or not to do. Everybody, we make decisions at every point of our life. So another issue there is that what I can call concealment of power and structural issues. Such a claim often deflects responsibility from those who hold greater power and influence. At the federal level, corruption assumes a wider and more involving dimension than at the ward level or local government level. So it can serve as a small screen for elite impunity by implying that since everyone is corrupt, no one is particularly blameworthy. That is the impression we are creating. And it diverts attention from systemic failures, institutional decay, and deliberate policy choices that foster corruption. So these are the issues that we must look at. And then it also brings about what we call complicity and selective morality. The statement can also be an unintentional conversion of complicity or selective morality. People may tolerate or participate in certain corrupt practices because they have been normalized, e.g., paying bribes for basic services. Now, children are looking for admission. The next is to come and see Professor Tajuddin Yusuf, Professor Ismail Ibrahim, Professor Tunde Akoni, that look, I heard Tunde Akoni is in LASU, Dr. Misadele is in LASU, Tajuddin is in go and meet him. When you know there are scores, if your child does not meet the score, why do you come to bother me? So you expect that because I am there, even though I don't belong to that department, you think, Professor Yusuf must be able to help us now. Chibi is there, he's a professor in University of Lagos. We should be able to get my daughter in, my son in, even from those of us who ought to know. So that is the problem. So this reveals moral flexibility that often correlates with survival in corrupt systems, not necessarily with ethical failure. And I can also see it as a normalized defiance. Sociologists like Diane Vaughan coined the term normalization of defiance to describe how unethical practices become routine when they go unchallenged. There are criteria for admission. You meet the criteria, you get in. You don't meet it, go and wait till next year or go and seek admission elsewhere. Everybody ought to know that. But over time, we jettison this reality, and then we now put pressure, undue pressure on ourselves. And I see that in many societies, corruption becomes embedded in everyday life, not due to inherent moral flaws in people, but because systems reward non-compliance and penalize integrity. There is the traffic light says we should stop. When there are no vehicles coming from other directions, you see people behind you glaring their horns on you. That move, no, I see somebody's there, but the light still says stop. Why must I move? So you tend to, and you see them cursing you from right, left, and center. Let this man go now. Whereas the traffic light says red, it means I should wait. It is not yet time to move. But you look around you. Look at the eyes with which they will be swapping behind you from your side, and they'll be cursing you that you are wasting their time. So you tend now to see that with the pressure, you tend to see yourself as a social misfit, that you are not a normal human being. Therefore, saying we are all corrupt may reflect environmental conditioning rather than inherent moral failure, because everyone has the right to make a decision. I am not corrupt, and I stand by that fact. Why not losing sight of different dimensions that corruptions take? We must try to do what I call undermining reform and resistance. When people undermine, when they say we are all corrupt, it means it could be demobilizing. It suggests that reform is futile because everyone is equally tainted. So it ignores the many individuals and institutions striving to act ethically within corrupt environments, often at great personal cost. So we must never allow such statements to gain primacy in our public discourse. No, we can all stand, we should all be ready to say, no, I am not corrupt, and I stand by it. So it is not accurate to claim that we are all corrupt. Rather, such a statement often conceals deeper issues, which we must never allow to happen. Such issues are complicity, born of survivor rather than malevolence. Also, selective morality, shaped by social norms and unequal powers, and normalized defiance in a system that make ethical behavior risky or unrewarded. So a more honest and constructive conversation recognizes degree of responsibility. It highlights systemic enablers of corruption and supports ethical resistance rather than assuming universal moral failure. We may have this thing gaining ground, corruption gaining ground in all nooks and crannies of our society, but I must still tell you, there are still very honest people of integrity in our society. And what I will champion and call for is for people of like minds, those who have sworn to be upright in their dealings, to come together. If they don't, and I must tell you, it impacts tremendously in our society, whereby the less performing governments take it for granted that once there is no organized civil society, the corrupt elements at the ends of affairs will continue to have their ways. The moment you have organized civil society, whereby societies at the street level says, no, this is what we want. This is where we are going. We want to be involved in how we are being ruled. What is the budget of this local government this month, this year? So what has been voted for education? What has been voted for health, for security? We want to know. The moment politicians see that people are getting more and more organized, I tell you, it can go a long way in dousing and reducing corruption to the minimum. We should never succumb to that statement. You know, it's a subtle blackmail that, look, don't try to stop it. It has come to stay. We are all tainted. No one no, there are levels of corruption. The level of corruption at the local government level is not as it is the federal level. So that is what I want to emphasize for now.
This is beautiful. And that's the reason why we requested Professor Tajideen to dissect that. He has been able to unmask, because we invited us to unmask that wrong narrative. We are corrupt. That all of us are thieves. You know, those who are unfortunate are those who are caught in the act. This is wrong. It is a thing of the mind. We should resist it. And corruption has levels. He emphasized that. And based on the levels, punishment should be appropriated appropriately based on the gravity. That is very, very succinct. So let's go to Dr. Ganiat, a media and gender researcher. To what extent do religious institutions, through actions or inaction, reinforce or resist the normalization of corruption across generations? So by religious institution is both Muslim, Christian, traditionalist, even free thinking is a religion. So to what extent do religious institutions, through actions or inaction, reinforce or resist the normalization of corruption across generation? Over to you, Doctor.
Okay, thank you very much for that question, sir. We'll find that we have actually a mix of both. On the surface, on the minbar, the pulpit, we have religious leaders condemning corruption. But when it comes to praxis, we find that the condemnations are just talk. Okay, so I would say that when it comes to the text, religious texts, the Quran, the Bible, and when it comes to the proverbs, the incantations of traditional worshippers, you will find them talking about justice, equity, fairness, not taking advantage of people, not taking what doesn't belong to you, and all of that. As a Muslim, I would say that the longest verse in the Quran is Quran 2 verse 284, and is on contract to ensure that when people make agreements, they keep to it. When you look at Surah Al-Mu'minun, when it talks about the believers who make paradise, there are people who render the trust to those who are due. Of course, as Muslims who attended government schools where we are made to do CRK, Christian religious knowledge, we are taught about the need to be fair, to not take what does not belong to you and all of that. And so there is no doubt, there is no doubt whatsoever that the religious affiliations and ideologies that Nigerians subscribe to condemn corruption. This is not in doubt. But what is actually, what is alarming, what is saddening, is that while we preach this, in the way we relate to corruption issues, we actually do something else. So I'm going to tell you, we have cases of corrupt politicians who have come back from prison and who have been welcomed glamorously by big and popular, or sometimes even live church sessions that are covered live on national television. We have individuals that have been accused of corruption or that are in courts, handling corruption issues, that have been awarded and that have been granted honorary or religious titles in the mosque, or where they tie turban and all of that. So the reality is that for as long as we do not act in ways that align with the scriptures that we preach, that align with the sermon that we give, then it is just all talk. It won't amount to anything. And so the reality is that sometimes you would even find that sometimes the topics are not even they are not as pungent as they should be. And you will find in some other cases where imams or religious leaders would give wrong interpretation to verses just to suit the idiosyncrasies and pander to the ego of the politicians or whoever is on seat. So the reality is, it is one thing for the ideology to be against it. It is another thing for for those who are actually adherents of that ideology to say it and then to leave it. So we can preach it for as long as we want. If we do not live it, if we do not, address people based on to what extent we believe that they are applying or imbibing the ideologies, then we're joking and we're not ready to actually, end corruption. And I believe that, I thank you for this topic, because you see, there's no way we can talk about democracy in Nigeria without talking about corruption. And this is because we can never enjoy the dividends of democracy. We are not going to be able to achieve a better society, that we assume that democracy should accord to us, as long as we are corrupt and we do not do things the right way. So it's unfortunate that when it comes to theory or text, all religious organizations, all religious ideologies in Nigeria condemn it. But when it comes to practice, when it comes to the stance of religious organizations or their speakers or their opinion leaders, we do not act. We do not walk the talk. We do not walk the talk, basically. So we say it, but our actions show that we are not ready to follow it. And that is why we are here today. And I hope that in the next 100 years, we are still not celebrating democracy in the country where the average individual does not have any form of good living, because democracy is not serving the people.
This is beautiful, very beautiful submission. In Nigeria today, people condemn corruption, non-performing governors, chairman local government, senator, but yet our religious authorities accept Hajj Lord, Jerusalem's Lord, Salah's Lord, Christmas hamper, why the rules are bad. So my question to Professor Hakeem Yusuf is, how has Nigeria's political culture entrenched corruption to the point of making it legacy passed from one generation to another. Again, how has Nigeria's political culture entrenched corruption to the point of making it a legacy passed from one generation to another?
Thank you very much. Before I go on, I was just looking at the comments by participants, and I encourage Professor Lukman to look at it too, and even every participant, if you are not looking at it. I'm really happy at what people are saying, because it envisages some of the things you are talking about, and they are responding to what our colleagues are saying. I'm hoping there will be time for people to contribute and ask questions. Now, you're right. Sadly, we have an entrenched culture, political culture of corruption. And I think this is what is grand corruption. This is what is known as grand corruption. This is what Professor Professor Yusuf, who is my brother, but not by blood, just for clarity, as was talking about when he said, well, giving somebody a small tip to hasten an administrative process of something is not the same as the mindless way which our political elite have actually carried on. First, I slightly disagree, but that may delay us. I slightly disagree with Professor Yusuf, just to say that for me, every form of corruption is symptomatic of a systemic problem. And it is corruption that if I'm paid to do this, I still need you to mobilize me, or as they say in the police station, for instance, and because I want faster action. I am paid to provide prompt action. And if I provide prompter action for you than for the other person, then it is corruption. So just to be clear, but I take the point that Professor Yusuf was making, and this is grand corruption. How has that become entrenched? Let's go back. Let's go back. We can go back. Some will agree, some will disagree how far we want to go back. I want to go back to the colonial days. Look, the colonial system introduced the contemporary form of corruption that we have in Nigeria, where they say that agbefoba ki jebi in Yoruba parlance, for instance, so that those who were servants, civil servants of the, or administrative officers of the colonial system were corrupt. Let me take one example, because the whole thing I want to talk about is impunity. The fact that what has led to this entrenchment is the culture of impunity. I remember the former vice president, Professor Oshibagi, was saying something about this. It's impunity, where people commit wrongful actions and we do not punish them. We do not punish them. People complain, for instance, from the people are afraid of Sharia, for instance. Why? Because it abhors impunity. It abhors impunity, and it's very emphatic on upholding ethics. But let's go back to the colonial period, like I said. In the colonial period, look at today, one of the most apparent corrupt institutions, with, I must say, some members of it being ethical and professional, because I've worked with them. That's the Nigerian police. The problem we have today with the Nigerian police, with impunity and corruption, did not start from 1960. It started with the creation of Nigeria's police. The first police that was created, police force that was created in Nigeria, is the police constabulary. The police constabulary of Northern Nigeria that was created, that was known as the Glover Boys. They were created in Kaduna. It was created in the north. When Governor Glover, when it was created, they brought police force, police officers from the north who did not speak the language we speak in Lagos, whose culture is different, but whose allegiance was to the colonial government. They put them in a barrack. They are loyal to the colonial government. They are supposed to maintain law and order and discipline. But they also were pillaging people. They will go to the market and seize people's goods. Yes, go and find out. They will seize people's goods. and there was no recourse to any justice. Why? Because the colonial government was being protected by them and they were the enforcers. That culture of impunity is what you find today. We still engender corruption in Nigeria's police force. We pay communities, we pay lip service to community policing by taking police officers from the east. We take them to Sokoto. Police officers from the west, we take them to Borno. Police officers from Borno, they bring them to Oyo. So there is no allegiance or understanding of the culture. What there is an allegiance to upholding the power they have been given, the guns they have been given, and those who have put them there look the other way. When we got independence, that system continued. That system continued. That system of colonial governance continued, and it entrenched corruption because colonialism itself was a huge form of corruption where those people have come from outside of our continent to capture our resources, to rule over us by force, to take control of our resources and use it in the way they want. And whatever approach allows them to do that, it was fine because it was impunity. Of course, today that is no longer allowed in international law. Well, I don't even want to say we see it still in operation. But that system of impunity that was brought about has continued. Look at it. Has every administration, let's just take from 1999 today, during the government and immediately after, you find so many governors. There are more than 100 governors altogether now that are being prosecuted one time or at one point or the other. How many of these prosecutions have actually gone on to completion? And that has now seeped down to our youths. Now we have a culture of people also wanting to get rich, Yahoo boys. But they're not only, just like the EFCC chairman said, they're not only getting rich through Yahoo anymore. In fact, they are being infected by politicians who are using them as fronts for laundering money. The same with many other industries. I think it was Professor Akoni who said earlier that it has now seeped through every strata of our society. Professor Yusuf was complaining about the pressures on academics for corruption. This is why he was emphasizing on grand corruption, because it is like when the head is rotten, literally, no matter how fine nice that fish is. So when the head literally has gone rotten, then the whole body will go rotten. The political corruption and impunity that are seen leaders over leaders, from local government chairmen, which we tolerate, by the way, and which, like Dr. Adenle said, we praise in our religious, our ethnic, our cultural groups. It is our own thief. Why should he be punished? The political arrangement that says that it is the turn of this group, it is the turn of that group. This, what is it they call it? Political zoning actually has come to entrench corruption more. That's why the corruption that has happened during democracy seems to make a joke, okay, of what has happened before. The former president, a military ruler in this country who was being deemed as very corrupt, gave an interview, he's alive and well, some few years ago. And he said, look, they said we are corrupt. Look at what is happening now. It's like we are angels. Can you imagine that? This is a person that is known to have been Mr. Settler that instituted corruption finally in Nigeria for political culture, as part of the political culture. But he was right. Unfortunately, he said it's like we are angels. If you Google it, you'll see the interview. When I read it, I was appalled. But he's right. He said it's like child's play, what we were being accused of. One single minister of oil, natural petroleum. We are finding that with just one person. What has happened? They have been able, in connivance with Nigeria's former colonial master, been able to ensure that that person is evading justice. 8 whole years has gone. Another 2 years after her tenure, she's not still being brought to justice. thing from the colonial period that we do not deal with those with power, which Professor Yusuf was talking about, as entrenched state, and we all celebrate it. Professor Akone, and somebody said somebody said in the what is it called in the chat, when turn by turn, you know, when it is the just turn, let him be corrupt, is our own. When is the Hausa Fulani turn, let him be corrupt. When it is the Igbo's turn, let him be corrupt. We can support him. So it is turn by turn corruption. And that has brought a breakdown to all the values in society. So it's impunity. My answer to your question in one word is impunity. We need the courage to deal with political corruption. If we deal with it, it will have a major effect. But I beg to also say that everyday corruption, which is what leads or encourages or also justifies or vindicates political corruption, needs to be addressed, so that from the gate man who does not allow us to get into the office to see Oga, to the clerk who keeps the file, so that we will not be able to act on it, to the Oga who himself wants a share before he can sign. All of this is symptomatic of what has happened within our system. But before I conclude on this, when we keep talking about the politicians, I was a civil servant in Nigeria, and I know, just like this, the EFCC chairman said recently, first, the politicians will not be able to be as corrupt as they are if they do not have the support, sometimes the encouragement, sometimes the instigation of civil servants. In fact, statistics have shown that civil servants going about looking haggard, poorly, they have built estates of 100 houses, 200 houses. Their children are abroad. Where did they get the money from? So when we say political corruption, please, it is also a grand issue for the civil service. They are the ones that show that this is where to. And by the way, when we talk about that, the private sector is also part and parcel of it. How can you become a senator today, before you even are sworn in? The banks come to you and give you a loan of 200 million. You just find it in your account. They actually just bring the form to you to sign. Yes, they bring the form to you to, okay, just sign. His salary for 4 years is not supposed to come to 200 million. Without prompting, the banks give them. That's why they are able to have billions, trillions in an economy that is depressed. That's how they are making the profit. So this thing about political is not just the politicians. There's the civil servants, there are the private sector, there are the low officers, and there are the senior officers. It's a culture of impunity, and we must understand this in order to address it. Thank you.
This is fantastic. And that's the reason why I told you that we have carefully selected this caliber of panelists. They are saying it the way it is, no compromise. And you can't see this on Nigerian television because these are people who are independent, scholars with pedigrees. So I want to go to Professor Akone. The question is, how do global perceptions of Nigeria's corruption problem affect the self-esteem, aspiration, educational, or business opportunity of its citizens abroad? Again, how do global perceptions of Nigeria's corruption problem affect the self-esteem, aspiration, and educational or business opportunity of its citizens abroad?
Thank you very much. Well, the first thing I want to alert all of us to is that now the world is what has come to be known as a global village. That's number one. Number two is that all boundaries are becoming increasingly blurred, courtesy of digital technology. So the implication of these 2 points that I have raised is that if you do something in one small corner of China, don't be surprised that it might send ripples to the remotest part of Saudi Arabia or Nigeria. So there is hardly anything that happens in Nigeria that is not visible to the man in Singapore or Brunei or wherever. So when you talk about this global perception, the other day, unashamedly, Rotimi Amechi, former governor of Rivers State, who has been in government for no fewer than 20 years, was talking about the fact that now everywhere he goes, he's ashamed of his green passport. I say unashamedly because these are the same set of people who actually reduced us, who have come to reduce us to this terrible level. This same Rotimi Amechi, the other time, when he was being screened, prior to his appointment as transport minister by Buhari, Nigeria's most ineffectual leader, somebody who was seen, who was actually who was elected into office because of what we perceived as his anti-corruption stance, then, fell so low, sat aloofishly, and allowed corruption to be perpetrated to whatever level. I will never raise a finger. Now back to Amechi. Amechi was governor of Rivers State, two-term governor. He was transport minister. When he was being screened, he was saying, I don't like money. But records are there that there has hardly been as much corruption in any regime as much as had been perpetrated by Rotimi Amechi and co. under Buhari. So when he talks about his being ashamed of the green passport around the world, he should just hold himself accountable, himself and his colleagues. So the reality today is that, unfortunately, because of what we do back home here, there isn't so much respect for us. When people see you, the presumption first is that, as a matter of fact, I watched a video clip where a Nigerian entered an office, I think in the UK or so, and he was prospecting for some services. And before he opened his mouth, the person that was to attend to him just confronted him by saying, hey, I know you are going to lie, but please be smart with your lie. You can imagine that kind of pessimistic embarrassment. I know you are going to lie, but please be smart with your lie. So the quantum of corruption that is being perpetrated in the public space in Nigeria has been so much, and is being reported by the media anyway. And we all know, we are all alive to the fact that the internet doesn't forget. Virality of information today is unprecedented. The quantum of information in the public space is such that reporters hardly need to undertake investigative journalism to be able to come up with, bales and bales of information on corruption in Nigeria. Which of the sectors is not corrupt? Is it education, where Ezekwesili had wanted to sell off all of the Unity schools at some point, and to who? Perhaps to ourselves only. That is the level of avarice on the part of Nigerian public officials. How about an individual attempting to steal railway wagons, rail coaches? You can imagine how do you steal such spectacles? We have it on record that the former sports minister, Jimmy Wobodu, once stole generators from the National Stadium. Recently, the education minister, Tuji Alausa, gave the directive that all federal universities in Nigeria must publish. And I'm happy that Professor Tajuddin Yusuf is here. So he needs to take this message back home to his vice chancellor. Professor Tuji Alausa, education minister, gave the directive that all federal universities must publish all of their financial statements on their website. How many of our universities have complied? These are citadels of learning. These are institutions that are supposed to offer model conduct to the larger society. They are not doing, they are failing the society instead of offering themselves as models. But who are the people pointing the accusing fingers? Osita Chidoka, former CEO of Federal Road Safety Commission, started an NGO, and he felt he would be he said he felt that he could use his NGO to monitor the conduct of federal universities. How did he manage the Federal Road Safety Commission when he captained it? So, doctor, will you heal thyself before you look beyond yourself? So, corruption is so omnipresent, is so ubiquitous in our public space, and is affecting different corners, different levels of the society. And the media are there reporting at different levels. Local media, international, indeed, are there local media again? Because courtesy of the internet, once you manage to secure a space online, then you have become a global media entity. People have access to you everywhere. So, what are we talking about? The world keeps seeing us as we keep washing our dirty linens in the public. It's up to us to quickly recover, get back on track, and begin to do the needful to recover self-respect for ourselves. We keep going to different parts of the world, and people look at us. You are from Nigeria. The moment they ask you that question, and they don't want to say anything, who knows the kind of thoughts that are welling up within them? For now, let me stop.
That's a very good submission. To Professor Tajuddin Yusuf, how does family upbringing and exposure to corrupt behaviors shape the moral compass of children? And what does this imply for Nigeria's future? Again, how does family upbringing and exposure to corrupt behaviors shape the moral compass of children? And what does this imply for Nigeria's future?
Yeah, thank you very much. You see, family upbringing and early exposure to corrupt behaviors, this play a very crucial role in shaping a child's moral compass. And in a country like Nigeria, where corruption has deeply infiltrated public and private life, this influence carries profound implications for the nation's future. Now, let's look at the family as the first moral school for every child. Children learn moral values such as honesty, fairness, responsibility, and respect from observing the daily actions and decisions of their parents or their caregivers. So when parents and guardians, when they justify dishonesty, everybody does it in the presence of a child. You know, children don't look at what you say. They rather copy what you do because they don't have the brain yet to analyze and internalize and assimilate what you are saying. But they can see your body language. They watch the body languages of their parents, of their elders, and how their family is being run. They are witnesses to it. So when they see all these things, when their children, their parents, somebody's asking for them, their parents makes their face in such a way that don't let them know I'm around. They see it, they internalize it. So you can be at home sometimes and vain absence, you know. So when children when they see that in their family, they encourage cutting corners, you know. So they teach children that corruption is normal, you know, and it's necessary and even smart to do it. So, and because another has once said that children learn more from what you are than what you teach. They learn more from what you are than what you teach. So what also happens when you see the model behaviors versus preached values? So many Nigerian households preach integrity, but model compromise. You know, a parent might scold a child for cheating in school while celebrating fraudulent success in business. The father has just gone out to manipulate election or participate in electoral fraud, and they come home to blame their children for cheating in school. You can blame a child for stealing, but you, as a father, you live largely by taking bribes, you know. So this disconnect breeds moral confusion and cynicism, where ethics are seen as flexible and negotiable. So such cognitive dissonance fosters what psychologists call moral disengagement, a state where individuals rationalize unethical behavior as justified, harmless, or inevitable. So what can we do? If the heaven is going to fall, we are all going to go for it, you know. So early exposure to systemic injustice. Children can see their mother, their father toasting the daughter of a neighbor. The child is looking at the father doing that, having extramarital activities in the presence of their children, or a child looking, being witnesses to his or her mother engaging in extramoral activities, you know. So what are you saying? So when children observe public officials stealing without consequences, teachers or examiners accepting bribes, religious or community leaders complicit in wrongdoings, often internalize a belief that integrity is unrewarding and that success depends on one's ability to manipulate the system. So there is that general belief that I can never be rich by being honest alone, that I can never survive financially or economically unless I steal, unless I deceive, unless I perpetrate fraud. That mentality, that mindset gains ground rapidly because we show it when parents in their homes are watching films that are glorifying illicit wealth acquisition. We support it, we see it, we glorify it. No lesson is being taught. So this leads to desensitization, a dangerous erosion of outrage at injustice, and helps perpetuate the cycle of corruption into adulthood. So what is the implication for Nigeria's future? Now, if large numbers of children grow up normalizing or justifying corrupt practices, the future risks are severe. Number one, it weakens civic culture. Future leaders and citizens may lack the moral conviction to challenge injustice. Entrenching inequality, because in that situation, merit and fairness will give way to nepotism, bribery, and mediocrity. And you can see it manifesting in all spheres of our lives. Another thing is undermined institutions. The institutions have collapsed. Public trust. It erodes people's belief that every man is for himself. Yeah, the reverse is also true. When families that intentionally nurture ethical thinking, expose children to positive role models, and instill a sense of civic duty and empathy, can raise a new generation of reformers and change makers. Every day, every family, every morning, sit down. Children, what is your program for today? Where are you going? How do you want to spend your day? Who are your friends? Paying unscheduled visits to their schools. Unscheduled visits. Attending open day. When you attend open day, you look at how is my child behaving in school? Who are his friends? What time did he leave home? What time did he get to school? Parents must be conscious. You raise children to show that, look, there's no room for cutting corners. If your child fails a course, sincerely fails a course, let the child repeat the class. Don't try and say, let's go and meet the lecturers. No, you failed. Yes, repeat the class. I will never go and bribe any lecturer to give my child mark. Okay, my child didn't meet the cutoff. That's it. Let's go and try again. And you try to support that child that, look, you must get it legitimately. I'm not going to support you to just put it in anyhow. And you see, the aftermath or the consequence of the prevalence of corrupt practices is seriously jeopardizing the future of this nation. And until some of us says no, and those of us who say no, we meet from time to time to share experience and strengthen that bond, it may never change. So family upbringing is not just a private matter. It is a national investment. And I've never seen any government since the dawn of democracy in Nigeria in 1999. I've never seen any government making ethical revolution. The last time we heard of ethical revolution was in Shagari era. Ethical revolution. And during the Buhari Idiagbon era, Buhari Idiagbon 1, I'm not talking of Idiagbon 2, Buhari 2. Ethical revolution. Let people at the ends of affairs show good examples. Show good examples. Imagine if Nigerians can see that our leader goes through the same issues. We can see our president or our government officials queuing at petrol stations. Everybody on the queue, and things are going well. People get to their offices in time. All these things go a long way in reorientating the masses that look, we have responsible leaders. And I must be honest with us here, on this platform, that I don't see the current democracy or how our system is structured in Nigeria as delivering this ethical change that we all clamor for. The system is so structured that you can never get anything out of it. So what behoves us is that there must be, let there arise a band of people calling to that which is good. Forget about you being in minority. It takes time. Two people can only be guilty of a crime. The doer of that crime, the perpetrator of that crime, and those who see it and remain silent. Keeping silent in the face of no, it is not going to help anybody. Rather, the good-minded people who are largely driven by ethics, should be the one to champion the cause. Never mind how long it takes, but conscience, if the conscience is clear that no, I am not corrupt. If all family upbringing is not just a private matter, like I mentioned earlier, it's a national investment. Government must vote, dedicate certain budget on it. A time, maybe once in a month, once in a week, an hour, a family hour that mandates all parents that you must be at home with your children now. You must be at home, and the government will also bring out the curriculum for such meetings. That is a national thing that families must meet. They must do something. What are they going to say to one another? They already know. The government must help them, because some people, they just father children that they don't even have what it takes to nurture those children. So it must be a national investment. The moral education of Nigerian children will determine the ethical quality of its future workforce, leaders, and citizens. So if corruption is taught in the home, corruption will rule the future. But if families teach integrity, courage, and responsibility, even when the system fails, then hope remains not just as sentiment, but as strategy.
Beautiful, beautiful submission from Professor Yusuf. What he said is happening in Japan and some other part of the world, where people are called human capital development. By human capital development, we are not talking about intellectualism alone, moral, spiritual, all-round, balanced education. But the most important thing is failed parenting. Our parents were very, very poor, yet they raise quality kids despite poverty. The last question to Dr. Ganiat Adenle. Why do many religious leaders shy away from publicly denouncing corrupt politicians? And what does this say about moral leadership in Nigeria? Combining with, are there documented cases where religious or traditional teaching successfully reshape public morality and reduce corruption? A very good example is what our parents used to tell us when we are young, that ọmọ yín ò ṣàgbàfọ̀, ó ń káṣọ wálé, ẹ mójú olè, ẹ ò rí. But now people don't do that anymore. So please, what is your thought on this?
Okay, thank you very much, sir. The reality is, I've been listening to the other speakers, and I can't help but conclude that sometimes, I know it's not hopeless, but sometimes it appears so, because it's like a loop. Even if you are sometimes, like, it seems like impossible for you. I know I've argued with somebody about exam malpractice before, and the argument is, okay, you tell me not to cheat for my child, so my child studies and scores legitimately 250, and then some people cheat and maybe they score 350, and then there's a cutoff mark, and my child can't come in, and those who are not as good as my child comes in. So I think the problem is just that it feels like it's interrelated, it's interconnected, and each one, the failure of each sector leads to corruption in another sector. But I'll go straight to the point. The thing is that sometimes, the only place where you can actually get people to reflect is actually in at religious gatherings, because there's that connection with God. At that point in time, everybody, there's respect for the spiritual leadership, there's a willingness to listen, and whether we like it or not, as Nigerians, we are very spiritual people. We want to make heaven, and so religious institutions play very critical roles when it comes to um you know, promoting a sense of, as in when it comes to condemning corruption in Nigeria. But unfortunately, they are not able to adequately perform this role. See, number one is we have a lot, and I'm going to start with Islamic schools, for example. So we have a lot of candidates, especially the men, going to Arabic and Islamic institutions where by the time they are done, they have an equivalent of an O-level certificate. And unlike some scholars who have actually been promoting the need for enterprise, because the Prophet ﷺ had the career, the companions had careers, a lot of these schools do not combine any form of technical education or even secular education in the curricula. So we have thousands of candidates graduating every year with no job, no skill, no career path. And the only thing they have to do is look for a mosque or an organization to find followership. And the only way they can earn is by patronage of this followership. So what do we expect? Number one is that there's no way religious organizations are actually going to be able to, you know, curb corruption if there are fear of political repercussions. So if you feel like if you are critical and you call people out, they are not going to invite you to give lectures anymore. They are not going to come to your asalatu. They are not going to give you money. And if you are not even refined and careful in your presentation, you can be arrested for defamation. You can be arrested by the police. Even media journalists are being arrested for publishing balanced stories with evidence, with facts, with sources. So imagine somebody going on the pulpit and then talking, and they don't even have the coverage that even journalists who have the right to protect their sources, who have all of these rights, they are harassed daily. So there's always the fear of being blacklisted, the fear of not being patronized. And so at every point in time, they have to worry about their income, their source of feeding, and they have to ensure that they get this invite. And they are not going to get it if they are not saying what is interesting to the people, to the community. Another thing is that, as religious organizations, especially Muslim religious organizations, we don't have, even though Allah has given us the perfect system of the zakat, a lot of people do not, pay these. And for those that do, they might not pay it to institutions that are able to use it for the propagation of Islam. So majority of religious organizations are completely dependent on donations from members, from wealthy members, from elites, from politicians and all of that. And so if they face corruption head on and they really tackle it, they are going to be the fear of losing political patronage is also very, very important. And so this would always prevent them from doing the right thing. And there's always the need to, maintain access to power. Now, when Professor Tadeusz was talking about admission and all of that, the reality is, except we don't want to be sincere, it's not in all cases that people get things based on merits. There's corruption everywhere. And so when people feel that the only way they can get things, whether they are entitled to them or not is another thing, is that they need to get, they need to know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody that is in power. If they want to remain visible, if they want to be on pilgrimage boards, if they want to get free art slots, if they want to get honorary positions and become members of advisory councils, they have to be in the good book of the wealthy, the rich, and the powerful. Then there's no way they can ever talk through to power. Now, we also have ethnic and regional loyalties. Unfortunately, Islam, Islam abhors ethnicism, ethnicity, and all of that. Everybody, we're all one. But we have to be realistic that unfortunately, it's not this is not everybody that follows those principles. And so you find that unfortunately some people would keep quiet because, and this takes into selective silence. Oh, this thing is wrong, but it affects this person, so we're going to keep quiet. And you find that, for instance, let's look at the example. If we watch the story of the late professor who was the head of NAFDAC, and if you watch her interviews before she died, and also her autobiography, her biography, you will find that she says, people would harass her and they say, "Oh, you are Igbo. Why are you tackling fake drugs? Don't you know that majority of these people are from your tribe?" And she said, "No, no, being Igbo does not mean that she's not going to keep quiet when they're killing people and all of that. In fact, being Igbo is what is going to make her do the right thing." Now, it's not everybody that thinks like that. So we find people who believe, okay, but this person is Yoruba, or it's from my hometown, it's from my whatever. And so if I complain and if I say this thing is wrong, and then I'm going to be fighting somebody that is close to me, forgetting the fact that even the Prophet Sallallahu said, "Assist your brother, whether it's the oppressor or the oppressed." When it's the oppressor, we understand. When it's the oppressed, we tell them, sorry, when it's the oppressed, we understand. What about when it's the oppressor? That is when you need to stop him from oppressing people. Now, even though Asobia, ethnicity, and all of that is disdained by the religion of Islam, but when people are still very sentimental about their ethnicity, the state they come from, and their region, you find that they are not really ready to do the right thing because they are being sentimental, and they believe that they need to protect their people. And then there's also that misunderstanding of religious duty and the duty of, when we're talking about, oh, is somebody's turn. Okay, so while we use regions and not religion, but we find the situation, but we find instances where people say, okay, oh, it's our religious turn. And if we condemn this leader, then it's as if we are condemning ourselves because this leader has this religious affiliation to us. And they're actually doing a misservice, a disservice to the religion, because the religion says even if he's of you and he's doing something that is wrong, you're supposed to condemn it, but we don't do that. And we also have people's personal greed. We've had instances where somebody went to an imam with a large following, and he was on Facebook saying that tó bá fẹ́ jẹ́yàn, o gbọ́dọ̀ jẹ́yàn. If you want to become something, then you have to eat people. So we have imams and religious leaders who are actually supposed to be condemning corruption, looking for the very soft life. No, Islam is the middle, why Islam follows the middle course. So we're not saying because we're Muslims we should be paupers, but we find situations where we have imams who want to live flamboyant lifestyles that their source of income cannot defend. And so you find people doing a lot of things that are actually even against the religion. Now, if these people themselves are going against religion and earning in questionable ways, how are they even now able to condemn other people who are doing the same or worse? So it's about what morality do we learn? Do we just teach Arabic language in our schools when we teach our imams, or do we really teach them the adab, the fear of God, the love for him, his religion, and the need to make the world a better place? So I feel like the religious training organizations have critical roles to play, and their lack of playing those roles is affecting the ability of religious scholars to actually play the key role they are meant to play in the society. And it's as bad as corruption is. Even, it's unfortunate, corruption is a big issue, but I'll say that it's becoming even minor in the face of the evidence of lack of ideology or decorum or the teaching of Islam in those who are learning to become Islamic leaders. I mean, we are having instances of some of them who are now even setting up cults after school. Some of them who are becoming so fetish that we can't differentiate between a traditional spiritualist and somebody that calls themselves Muslim scholars, are finding human parts. I mean, it's so terrible that there we have a crisis in our hands, and so we have to look at how to handle that before we even begin to expect them to actually solve the problem of corruption in society. So I feel like perhaps when you say your committee is focused on bringing town and gown together, I believe that maybe we should begin to think about how to connect and relate and network the religious training institutions that we have in Nigeria, particularly in the Southwest. Otherwise, they are going to be graduating people who are not just incompetent in the understanding of the religion, but who are actually going to use those qualifications to actually cause more harm than good. So I feel that our religious organizations, they are doing a disservice to Islam because they are like a far cry away from what the religion preaches and what they're expected to do. Now, it is not all sad news, and that is actually what I'm excited about. We are beginning to have individuals, Muslims, who themselves imbibe the teachings of the religion and would practice it in their lives, in their private lives, and where they work or where they perform their trade. We also have a lot of organizations coming about with integrity and with leaders who live what they preach and who walk the talk. Now, so what we have when it comes to whether we have documented cases of instances where Islamic teachings have brought, have influenced public morality and reduced corruption, yes, we do. We do. And I feel that this question shows poor documentation, of Nigerian Muslims. I feel like we do not document enough the giant strides that we achieved, the impact we have on society. So, for instance, I think last year or 2 years ago, there was a list published by WAEC of secondary schools that had been recorded or investigated for examination malpractice. And there was I think 2 years ago, maybe there were just two Muslim schools. There was a year where there was not a single Muslim school. I mean, I'm not saying there could be a secular school owned by Muslims, but when I'm talking about Muslim schools owned by ideological Muslims who set out to teach moral character as well as education, we didn't have them on that list. So this is to show that, I mean, we are Muslims and Muslim organizations, when they are determined to live by the laws of God and to make the world a better place because they are here on earth as ambassadors of God, we find that they are able to make great impact. And so the challenge is, I feel like we need to document them more, but a lot of them are localized. So for instance, Muslim schools or Muslim hospitals, or so we find these are localized. So maybe we need to document them, and then hopefully they are going to become mainstream. Then we also have some of them are by individuals as well. I'm almost every year. In fact, this year as well, there's been a record of a Muslim pilgrim from the north. Is it Kaduna or Plateau or something, that returned $5,000 that she came across a Hajj. In 2023, there was also somebody from Adamawa State who returned, and as airports, people forgetting phones in mobile in transport vehicles. So we have several cases of individual Muslims, and they would say, oh, by the time they interview them, I say, look, you are in need yourself. We are surprised that the person who is returning £8,000, $5,000, we see them and they are not in millions. And they say, well, I know I'm in need, but I also know as a Muslim that this does not belong to me. And so I have to give it back. So I feel that a lot we find, these cases from individuals following the teachings of this religion, when we also find localized cases of industries or of communities or of religious organizations. It's going to feel like, like a drop in the ocean. like, oh, we have this very huge, insurmountable problem. But when each individual goes out to say, as a person, as a Muslim, as a teacher, I'm going to do the right thing, before we know about it, before we know it, we're going to have ripple effects. I feel like when we're talking about corruption, sometimes I wonder whether we actually see the manifestation, how huge it is. I'll give you an example. I know people who I have a friend who gave birth to a child that was seriously jaundiced, and she almost lost her child because they had to take to infuse the child with blood. And at a government hospital, at a general hospital, they will tell them, oh, there's no blood, and they know that this is urgent. But they say, you know what, there are some labs that can help you call quickly. So if you can pay the money, I can help them to come and deliver it. And so they would collect money from these people, and 10 minutes later they'll say, oh, they've brought the blood that was in the blood bank at the general hospital ordinarily. So there was a time she was very apprehensive, and she was like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to wait here for whoever is bringing the blood to bring the blood. And it was a crisis, because eventually it was discovered that nobody is bringing any blood. Now, these lab attendants will just tell them, we don't have, but if you don't want your child to die, we're going to call somebody in a private lab to help you bring it. And they ran into a problem because the parents were apprehensive, and they refused to leave the lab. They wanted to wait for the blood to be delivered. I mean, this is to tell you, even in the health sector, I mean, there was a program I watched on African Independent Television, and a man walked into the public relations officer of the Nigerian police force was at the program. It was a Kakaki program, and a man walked into a hospital to make a complaint. Because he came alone and he didn't appear educated, at a government hospital in Bauchi, the doctor looked at him and told him he was going to die immediately if he didn't do an urgent surgery. And he wheeled the man into the theater and removed his, is it kidney or liver, I can't remember, sewed him back, gave him some analgesics, and sent him home. It was when he became really distressed, they took him to another hospital. They had a scan done, and that was when they told them that his organ had been harvested. I mean, when we're looking at corruption, we're looking at a catastrophe, like a calamity in every single sector. And I feel like, because I'm looking at my response from the religious institution angle, I am going to admit that yes, even people who are fraudsters, even kidnappers, you still find them going to religious organizations, going to religious institutions. We seem to have that connection in Nigeria, where no matter how evil people are, they still want to relate or integrate or connect to religious organization. And so we cannot ignore that institution, and we need to appreciate the power that they have. So maybe what we need to do is to begin to look for ways to ensure that they utilize that power to help our society, because we are dealing with something that is very huge, that is in all sectors. I mean, we are fighting terrorism in Nigeria, and yet we've had generals who would divert funds for ammunition for their personal use, and they will send soldiers you trained. They will send them to go and face terrorists with very poor equipment, inadequate. I mean, you are actually just sending them to the guillotine, and you are sending them to their death. And they are supposed to be like your children, because you train them, and they are not supposed to argue. They are supposed to have absolute trust in you that you are going to have their back, you are going to protect them. All the while you are diverting funds meant for ammunition to your private use, and you're sending them to their death. I mean, is there any sector in Nigeria that is not reeling of corruption? What sector? I can't think of any. There is absolutely.
Wow. This is really fantastic. Very nice submission. The time is really fast spent, and we have to close the. So in one minute, Professor Akin, what is your final comment in 1 or less than 1 minute? Your final comment.
So thank you so much. My final comment is this, that we have a systemic problem and we need a systemic solution. And part of that systemic solution is, on one hand, to have a group that are themselves examples. So MLA, we have the opportunity. Anywhere we are, I am not corrupt. Like Professor Yusuf said, I am not corrupt. I've worked in Nigerian civil service as a prosecutor, and I have a reputation. Go to Alausa. Between 2000 and 2006, I was there. As for Hakim Yusuf, I am not corrupt, and it earned me positive things. So we need to change the narrative. I am not corrupt, and I will not allow corruption, no matter how little. We must have a group that is dedicated to that. And our tomorrow, our youth, we need to reorient them. That, for me, is the most important thing going forward. Unfortunately, there are lost generations, like our sister was afraid of. But if we are going to change the narrative, let there be a group that is committed to not being corrupt, and let us also focus on the young generation that we are growing, and make it clear to them that there will be no future for them if they don't take a value stance. That is an ethical stance, that corruption will not lead us anywhere. Thank you.
Beautiful. That is a pragmatic prescription. The youth may be wayward, but they can actually be redeemed. You know, in recent times, many of them, they find solace with VDM. VDM resonates well with them. So if our imams, our pastors, our professors are role model, they will follow them rather than VDM. And VDM is doing its own part of the deal. It's providing them with education, entertainment, and of course, what we can call courage. But that is not the type of orientation a true Muslim youth or a true Nigerian youth should have. Professor Tajuddin, 1 minute. Okay, while waiting for Professor
Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah, okay, go ahead.
Thank you very much. My parting shot on this discussion is, let the good role models, let the fair-minded individuals, let the righteous elements in our community come together, forge a formidable alliance or alliances to take back our society from corrupt elements. You can't do it alone. So the more the good-minded people, the righteous people come together and demonstrate to the rest of the society that, look, it pays to be upright, it pays to be righteous, it pays to do things legitimately, I think our society will continue to be the better for it. Thank you very much.
Beautiful. Also, role modeling, what we can call national reorientation, among others, are what Professor Tajuddin advocates. Professor Tunde Akoni, your 1 minute parting shot.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think as scholars, we have two major roles, two major responsibilities in this regard. Number one is to serve as models, like Professor Hakim Yusuf submitted earlier. It's important for us to serve as, to offer ourselves as models to the young ones. But you see, because we are also scholars, it's also important for us to offer public intellectual services, give voice to anti-corruption campaigns. We shouldn't forget the fact that there are cynics in the society who want to despise your anti-corruption stance. Each time you demonstrate that you are honest, that you have integrity. Look at what happened to Professor Oloyede the other time. Yeah. The cynics in our society were ready to pull him down. Resign, you must. So, but I'm happy. Professor Lukman Raimi, all the way from Brunei, spoke out. Some of us also complimented that intervention. So each time there is need for us to speak out, we have all of the advantages. The digital media have come to offer us all of the opportunities. We must be ready to give utmost visibility to integrity campaigns, to anti-corruption campaigns, to condemning corruption. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Ganiya Tadele, your parting shots.
Okay, I think my parting shots would be that we have to keep hope alive. We have to believe that we can end corruption in Nigeria, because some people tell you, you know what, just give up. It can never end. You can't stop it. And I feel that would be a calamity. So my parting shot is, no matter how terrible it looks, no matter how difficult it appears, no matter how endemic, it is, no matter how impossible it may present as, we should be determined and believe that if each person keeps doing the right thing, over time, we are going to be able to end corruption in Nigeria.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I want to assure the listening public that this is a public discourse. This is just the beginning. It's on YouTube for you to follow, comment. And as usual, we normally come up with a communique. So within the next 3-4 days, our communique will be written and cascaded to the media, platform. And we also want to solicit the influence of Professor Tunde Akoni to help us push it to the mainstream media for proper dissemination. So you can continue to reach out to us so that this message will get to the corridor of powers, to our imam, to the pastors, to the youth, and everyone. This is on our own contribution to national development. We are not politicians, but we are scholars, and we believe that based on our calling, we have to provide what we can call intellectual foundation for fight against corruption, bad governance, and underdevelopment. So on this note, I want to call Dr. Nuruddin Bamiru to give us a vote of thanks and closing remark.
Thank you, Prof. Am I audible enough?
We can hear you.
Okay. Distinguished scholars, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Committee on National Issue Development and Advocacy, under the leadership of Muslim Lecturers Association, I stand before you with the immense gratitude as we bring this profound Democracy Day to a close. First, we express our heartfelt appreciation to our erudite scholars, the person of Professor Hakim Yusuf, Professor Tajuddin Akoni, and Professor Tajuddin Yusuf, or Professor Tunde Akoni, and Professor Tajuddin Yusuf, and Dr. Ganiya Tijani Adenle for their intellectually rich and thought-provoking contribution. Your interdisciplinary insights have helped us to unmask corruption from various lenses: legal, journalistic, actuarial, sociological, psychological, religious, and linguistic. You have truly challenged us to rethink the foundation of our national development. To our organizing committee, technical team, and volunteers, thank you for your diligence and seamless coordination behind the scenes. Your commitment makes today's event a success. To our global audience, both on Zoom and YouTube, your engagements brought this conversation to life. Thank you for lending your time, presence, and intellect to such a critical national dialogue. Finally, as we commemorate Democracy Day, let us not just reflect, but act. Let us live here not just more informed, but more determined to build a Nigeria where integrity is not the exception, but the norm. Thank you, and may peace, justice, and truth guide our democracy forward. Thank you.
Thanks to all. Bye.
Bye. Nice being here.
Same here. Bye, Dr. Akoni. Bye, Professor Akoni.